Chunks of ice rained down, and they covered their heads. The spray of snow blinded them, but Amy never let go of the tiller. Even over the engine, they heard the massive cracking of the ice. The Zodiac zoomed into the ice cavern as the huge chunk of the berg crashed into the sea. Ice and snow splashed into the sea, and pieces as big as Ian's fist landed in the Zodiac. "Hang on, we're going to get backwash," Amy yelled. The water moved as though a leviathan was beneath them, tossing them forward and bumping them against the craggy walls of the berg. They were well inside the iceberg now, and everything was gray and blue and showered with snow. More fissures appeared, cracks radiating down from the top. The roaring of the engine and the ice moved as they shot out of the tunnel, while another massive chunk calved off the berg and crashed behind them. They rode the rolling wave back to the Titanic too. Hanging onto the side, Ian wiped the snow out of his eyes and swept the bay behind them. Alec was having trouble keeping the Zodiac floating in the backwash of the water. He tried to navigate past the huge railroad car-sized berg and gave up. He turned the boat toward them and headed back toward Deception Island. Heading for the helicopter, Ian thought. The one that wasn't there. Amy rounded the stern of the Titanic too and bumped the boat up against the platform. "That was a little close," Hamilton said. "It's about to get closer," Dan said. 10 minutes until she blows. Run!" Titanic 2, Antarctica. They skidded to a stop in front of the door marked Engine Room, Crew Only. Ian swiped the panel and pushed open the door. They found themselves in a small locker room. Hard hats were piled in a box, and orange coveralls hung on the hooks. They each took a hard hat and put it on. A crew member walked through the door. "What are you kids doing down here?" "We're meeting Mr. Zimmer for a tour," Amy said. "He should be here any minute." "We are super excited." "Get a look at the guts of the ship, eh? Don't forget your earplugs." He pointed to a case. "And don't go in there by yourselves." "Of course not," Amy promised, and waited obediently until he'd passed through the exit door before grabbing earplugs and leading the way into the engine room. Immediately, they were hit with heat and noise. They were in the bulkhead of the ship. They walked out onto a catwalk that ran above and through massive machinery painted bright green. Everywhere they looked, they saw a confusion of machines, gauges, pumps, pipes, and controls. 3 stories of catwalks and ladders crisscrossed the space. Below them, a thick yellow shaft ran the length of the space. "That looks like the poop shaft," Ham said, leaning in so they could hear him. "Can you find the fuel tanks?" Amy asked, trying to keep the urgency in her voice tamped down. Hamilton anxiously peered down into the guts of the ship. "There, come on." "We've got 4 minutes," Dan said. They scrambled down a ladder to the lowest level of the engine room. A mechanic with his back to them was walking toward a staircase. They waited until he climbed up, their nerves taut and straining. Luckily, it was so noisy that no one could hear them, so they just had to move quickly and hope they weren't spotted. Even through the earplugs, the noise of the machinery thudded against Amy's eardrums. She thought, she felt the engine power in her body, in her bones. Each heartbeat counted out the seconds. They ran behind Hamilton to a massive metal tank. Ham climbed a small ladder to the top and unscrewed the valve. He motioned, and Ian passed up the first gallon of oil. Ham poured it in, tossed the empty back down, and motioned for another. The oil seemed to pour impossibly slowly. Dan held up 2 fingers. 2 minutes. Ian pointed to a touchscreen with several monitors. Keep your eye on the pressure gauge. It's spiking, but it should go down once the oil mixes in. The gauge was in the red. Amy watched as it edged farther into the danger zone. Hamilton kept pouring. The gauge stopped moving. The needle trembled. Dan held up 1 finger. Ham reached for the last gallon and poured in the oil in a steady stream. He closed the valve and stood still, waiting. The gauge began to sink back down into the green zone. Slowly, they watched it, their heartbeats hammering against their chests. "It's at a normal level," Ian cried. "Hooray!" He straightened his cuffs. Good show. I knew we could do it, though Sammy wasn't 100% sure it would work. Did I mention that? No, Hamilton said. Thanks for leaving that part out. Amy smiled at Dan. Her legs felt weak. We did it, Dan said. This Titanic won't sink. Ushuaia, Argentina. Jonah let out a whoop as the text came through. They made it! They saved the ship! Kara jumped up and threw her arms around him. They bumped hips in a dance. They made it. They made it. They made it. Jonah's phone buzzed again, and he ran for it. It's Nellie! If we disappear, ask Mabel. Who's Mabel? Jonah tapped out. Save my kiddos. Who is Mabel? Jonah tapped out again. There was no response. Attleboro, Massachusetts. The outcast smiled. At least he had the place to himself. So little resistance from the rest of the Cahills, he mused. It was something of a surprise. He'd planned for it, of course, even looked forward to it, but no resistance came. That Cabra boy was weak, pathetic. No wonder his father had disowned him. Now they were happy, thinking they bested him. They would soon learn how wrong they were. Let them race all over the world. Let them try to beat him, and he would be right here, right where he wanted to be. It was lucky for him that the children had chosen to rebuild Grace's mansion, almost as a complete replica of what she had. Of course, they had made changes. The extra floor with the digital suite and the apartments for visiting Cahills, it would all have to go. He didn't want guests. He wanted solitude and memories to fuel him. He climbed the stairs to Grace's library. This room, they had reproduced exactly, down to the molding and the windows and the fireplace, surrounded by green tiles. He remembered it all well. The same window seats covered in deep green velvet, and it looked as though, yes, very nearly, they had replaced almost every volume in the bookshelves, even the entire set of Shakespeare. He ran his hand along the spine of Much Ado About Nothing. Very funny, Grace. But I would have thought you would choose Macbeth, considering your penchant for blood. The hidden compartment slid out. So, the children replicated everything. The safe was inside. It was fireproof, so it had survived. And he still knew the combination. He spun the dial and heard the clicks. The door opened and he reached inside. He tossed aside the flat velvet box. Priceless pearls didn't interest him. He withdrew a folder. He took it over to the comfortable armchair by the window and began to leaf through the documents. Oh yes, very interesting. And just what he needed to destroy them. And just what he needed to destroy them. This has been the 39 Clues, the Doublecross series, book number 1, Mission Titanic. I hope you have enjoyed my horrible reading, and I must sincerely apologize for the accents and possible messing up of languages. Up next, while we wait for the next book, will be The High Druid's Blade by Terry Brooks, The Defenders of Shannara, book number 1. Hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you will, or if you want. Like this video, and I will see you in another. Ciao, Descendants.